So, hello there, and welcome back to another Night of the Movies podcast. And in these podcasts, I talk all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm doing the relatively new Netflix film, They Cloned Tyrone. But before I do that, I should say what I say at the start of every podcast I do, which is, if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello to my viewers. But if you prefer to listen to your podcasts, well, you can with this one at Nights and Movies on Spotify. And if you are already listening to the podcast on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check this podcast out visually on my YouTube channel at Nights and Movies on that platform too. Likewise, wherever you may be watching or listening to the podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the podcast, of course. And don't forget to leave me some feedback as well on things to improve on, because there's always things to improve on, and feedback is, as ever, much appreciated. So, let's get into it. Let's get into my review of They Cloned Tyrone. So, as I've already mentioned in this podcast, this is a relatively new Netflix original film. It was released about a week ago, but I'd actually realised that it was released about a week ago until I saw some good reviews of the film on Google a couple of days ago. Like, that film is out, because I'd seen some markets and some images from it a couple of months back, and I was like, oh, that looks like quite an interesting movie. Got Jamie Foxx and John Boyega and Teyonah Parris, I think that's how I pronounce the name, apologies if it's not. You've got them three in a film together. That seems quite interesting. Just the still image that I saw of all three of them, if you look it up online, that's the image you'll probably see of this film. You know, that was like the main marketing image for a long while, and I was like, yeah, that's a film I would watch just for that one image. There was something about it which was compelling me to watch this movie, but I didn't even realise it had come out on streaming until a couple of days ago. So last night I sat down to watch the film for the first time, and yeah, it was something. So the film follows the story of three characters. One of the characters, Fontaine, who is essentially the protagonist of the film, and he's played by John Boyega. And if you don't know who John Boyega is by name, he was Finn in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, he was in Attack of the Block, and most recently, he was in The Woman King. He plays protagonist Fontaine in this film. You have Yo-Yo, who is played by Teyonah Parris. If you don't know who Teyonah Parris is, she was Monica Rambeau in WandaVision, and she's going to be Monica Rambeau again in the Marvels coming up this November. And then you have Slick, which is played by Jamie Foxx. Slick, the character Slick, is played by Jamie Foxx in the film, and Jamie Foxx, if you don't know, is in Baby Driver. He played Electro in the Spider-Man films, and he was also in Ray. And those three characters, Fontaine, Yo-Yo, and Slick, are all shoved together after they realise something is going on with Fontaine. And at the same time, they also are realising that all these weird events are going on in this town that they live in. And when things start to unravel, everything gets more funky. And that's my plot synopsis for this film. That's the way I would describe the setup for this movie, because there's a lot more to it. Bear in mind the film is called They Cloned Tyrone, but I'm not going to get into the rest of it, because I think it's one of those films where when you watch it play out, it's more fun not knowing where it's going to go. Because, honestly, I had a really great time with this movie. It's a really, really good film. In fact, it's a great film. It genuinely surprised me. It has mystery, intrigue, and it's got this sci-fi element too. The sci-fi element to it as well, which I really didn't expect. Honestly, yeah. Really great movie, and I'm really surprised to say that, because I didn't hear many people talking about it until I came across reviews. You know, I think I was looking on John Boyega's filmography for some reason. I can't remember why. I think it was to see what he was up to soon, because I must admit, I'm a bit of a fan of John Boyega. You know, I loved him in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, and I kind of fell out of him when he was saying this bad stuff about the Star Wars sequel trilogy in recent years. You know, he was just talking about it as if it was just another job. Like, I get he didn't have the best time doing those films, I understand that, but there's some people, I think, in fact, loads of people, millions of people would kill to be in Star Wars, and he was just talking about Star Wars as if it was another job to him. And so I kind of fell out of him with all those comments he was making about Star Wars. But then, he's kind of turned back those comments. I mean, he hasn't turned back those comments completely, but he's talking about Star Wars in a more positive light now. And, if you can't tell, I'm a big Star Wars fan, just look behind me. So that does mean a lot to me, particularly because I loved his character in the sequel trilogy. Didn't love what they did to him, but, I did love that character nonetheless. And I really loved him in The Woman King as well, so I was really excited to see what he did next. And when he was in this movie, I was like, oh, I want to check this out. I want to check this out on Netflix. And he is great in this film. He's got this magnetic force with performance which makes you so interested in what's going on. Same with Jamie Foxx. I love Jamie Foxx in almost everything he's in. I even like him in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, in which he plays a very weird villain. I love Jamie Foxx so much, and he steals every single scene he's in this film. And Teyonah Parris is also very good in the movie. Very different than what I expect her to be. And, the character, when you meet, you think she's going to be one type of character, like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to get along with you. And then, as the film goes on, though, she transforms into a different character, a character that I particularly liked later on in the movie. And I loved all the mystery and intrigue of the film and how compelling it all was as well. You really don't know where this film's going, and there's certain sequences in the movie which really catch you off guard. Like, there's one sequence that takes place in a chicken shop. I'm not going to go into what happens, but the sequence starts off as just this normal scene between the main three characters talking. You think, oh, this is not really going to go anywhere. And then 2 minutes later, the scene has almost been tipped on its head. It's so interesting the way this film was structured, and I really, really liked it. I really didn't expect it, and I love the way it was directed as well. Like, the director, just make sure I get his name right here, Juel Taylor. I haven't heard of him before. I looked to his IMDb credits before doing this podcast today. He apparently, according to IMDb, he hasn't directed any full-length feature films before, so this is his first time directing a full-length feature movie. He has directed episodes of TV shows, but nothing like this, nothing as a 2-hour movie before. So, I was astounded by that, though. I was absolutely blown away by that, because his directing this movie is one of the things which really caught me off guard as well, because there's certain scenes in the film where the camera is moving in such a way and it's really capturing the energy and the feel of the scene, and you don't quite realise it until the scene's ended, but the scene has all been done in one long take, in a very Spielbergian sort of fashion. It's all been done in one long take. When it's not cutting, it's just it's just one continuing take, and I really loved that about it. And I couldn't tell that was happening in certain scenes until the scenes had ended, and I love the way he did that, and his framing and the way he stages certain scenes. Yeah, he is a director to watch out for. I didn't even honestly, if you told me he directed 3 movies before this, I would have believed you. He seems like such an experienced director, and yeah, I'm looking forward to what he does next. He's definitely a name to look out for. And I loved how this film as well was a sci-fi thriller, and it really built up in all of its sci-fi elements as the film went on, and it really turned into a movie that I didn't expect it to be. It's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Granted, I haven't seen that film in a very long time. I saw the original when I was a kid, and I don't remember much about it, but it's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers meets Attack of the Block, another John Berger film which I really love. I love Attack of the Block, by the way. If you haven't seen that movie, directed by Joe Cornish, came out in 2011. Such a phenomenal film. Not quite, this one isn't quite as good as Attack of the Block, but this movie is like, I've put it down here, Invasion of the Body Snatchers meets Attack of the Block, with some really interesting, compelling ideas. And I loved the way the needle drops were used. I loved the feel of the film as well. It's got this groovy feel to it, where there's this atmosphere in the film where you really, really like watching it. I can't explain what it's about. Maybe it's the needle drops, maybe it's performances, or maybe it's the way it's shot, but there's this feel of the film which makes it such an enjoyable and entertaining watch, though. Yeah, it's really good and far better than I expected to be. And I know I said that before, but I want to say it again because it's a Netflix original movie, and usually they don't turn out the well. Usually don't hear much about it, with the rare cases of examples like The Irishman or Trial of Chicago 7. You don't really hear things about Netflix movies because they normally turn out quite badly, and are normally not that good. This one is one to watch out for. I will say, I was one to watch because it's coming on Netflix already. I will say there are some negatives I have with the movie. There are some criticisms I had with the film. I think it could have had a bit of a better pace to it in its first 20 minutes. I wasn't timing or anything, but in the first 20 minutes, because it felt like 20 minutes, I was struggling a bit with the movie to fully get into it and fully get invested into the characters. All the characters seemed a bit unlikable at first, and I understand that might be the reason. I get that. I totally do. But it still didn't change the fact that I didn't like them and I couldn't get that invested into what was going on at the start of the movie, and it did take me a bit of time. About the 20-minute mark, it was about the 20-minute mark, things started to pick up. I won't say what happens, but the three characters are shoved together in a situation and then something appears. And yeah, it gets quite interesting from then onwards, but I just didn't love the opening 20 minutes. And I understand what the opening 20 minutes was doing, and it did have payoff. That's one of the things I really liked about the movie, the fact that the opening 20 minutes had payoff, and that it wasn't just wasting time or taking time to set the scene, because I've seen over the movies set the scene in 5 minutes and do it so well, and yet I was watching the start of this movie going, what's it trying to do? And then I understood that by the end of the movie. When I look back on this film, I understand what the opening 20 minutes was doing, but it just doesn't change the fact that I do think the pacing was a bit off there. But the pacing did pick up. The pacing did pick up as the film went on. This is one of those cases in movies where the film gets better as it goes on. It gets more and more intriguing and more compelling, and yeah, more fun to watch when you start figuring out what's going on when characters start telling you. The one thing I will say about the characters telling you what's going on in this movie, some of the exposition in this film, I can never say that word, I'm not sure I said it right then, exposition, some of the exposition in this film could have been done in a more imaginative fashion. It could have been done in a more creative fashion, because there's one scene in the film, and I won't spoil who, but you can look it up on Google, I'll tell you anyway, but I'm not going to spoil who, just in case you don't look it up on Google. But there's one scene in the film where this really famous actor shows up, and I could just tell what was going to happen in this game. I was like, oh, this guy is just going to come in and explain the plot to all of us. And it feels a bit generic. It could have been done in a more imaginative fashion, because a lot of the rest of the movie was quite creative and imaginative. And you're like the chicken shop scene, which is what he talked about. That scene really caught me off guard because of how creative I found it to be. But that scene where the character just stands there and basically explains the plot wasn't really that great in my opinion. Explains what's been going up to that point. I will say it's about halfway through the film, and there's a lot more plot after that. But yeah, I do think the exposition in this film could have been a little bit better, and there are some predictable moments in the film too. There's a couple of moments in the movie where I think the film thinks it's smarter than it actually is. Like, it's a smart movie, don't get me wrong, it caught me off guard, like what he mentioned a couple of times, but I think it thinks in a couple of moments it's smarter than it is. Like, there's one moment in the film where two characters say, something on the lines of this, they're gonna put this plan into action, and then it cuts, and you think the plan's gone wrong. I don't want to go into detail in case you haven't seen the film yet, but you think the plan's gone wrong, and I was sitting there going, this is clearly part of the plan. Clearly part of the plan is that the plan would go wrong. You know what I mean? Like in the Oceans films that you get a lot. When the plan goes wrong and it's part of the plan, I could tell where that was. I could tell where part of the film was going. And there's one scene, well, there's a couple of scenes actually where I could tell where things were going. It was just a bit predictable in moments. I mean, not overly predictable. I couldn't tell where the film was going overall. Like, I couldn't tell any of the twists were. I didn't guess any of the twists, but I did find it a little bit predictable, and it wasn't quite as suspenseful and intense as I perhaps wanted it to be, especially for a sci-fi thriller. Like, I've already mentioned Invasion of the Body Snatchers in this review, and I haven't seen the Invasion of the Body Snatchers remake with Donald Sutherland. I haven't actually seen that one, but I saw the original when I was a kid. That was a funny movie to watch when I was a kid because I didn't really know what was going on, but I saw the original when I was a kid. And I remember being terrified by that film. Granted, if I watch it now, it might be a bit dated, but you get the point. I was terrified by it. I found it such an intense watch. I didn't have the same reaction to this movie. And, Invasion of the Body Snatchers is considered a classic, so maybe I shouldn't compare this movie to that. But at the same time, I felt more intense watching Attack of the Block, which came out, just over 10 years ago now? Yeah, it came out in 2011, so yeah, it came out 12 years ago. And I remember watching that film. I only watched it for the first time last year and finding it very suspenseful. I didn't get the same reactions to this movie. And maybe I need to watch it under different circumstances. Honestly, I wish I saw this film in the cinema. That might be my biggest criticism. I wish I saw this in a cinema, because watching it in a cinema is such a different experience. You can get far more engaged in it. Whilst because it's a streaming movie, I don't know if it had some sort of a cinematic release or some sort of theatrical release. I generally don't know. But as far as I know, it was only released on Netflix, and I just would have preferred it so much more if I saw it in a cinema, because it's a far better experience watching a film in the cinema, especially a new release when you're excited about it, and there's that sort of engagement that you get in a cinema, which I just didn't really get in this film, because I saw it at my house. I saw my TV right there. I was watching it on my bed, which you can see in the background over there. I just I wanted to feel more engaged in it, but I don't think that's the film's problem. I think that's the fact that it's on streaming. I generally think that's what the problem. I generally think that's my. Yeah, generally that's my biggest issue in the movie. I mean, I've watched films in my house before and I've been totally engaged in it, but I don't know what it was last night. I don't know what it was about it, but it wasn't the film, because the film was actually probably the most engaging part of my experience, but there was just things going on which took me out of the film. But it wasn't anything about the movie, you got what I mean. I think it was just because I watched it in my house, and maybe watch it again on my TV downstairs when I don't have all these distractions behind me. I'll have a different experience with it. But I'm just talking about my experience that I had with the movie last night. I will also say too that there's some dialogue in the film which I found unengaging in the first half an hour though. Like I spoke about the fact that I found the film to be engaging mostly just before, but in the first half an hour, it took a bit to adjust to the dialogue, because there's a lot of swearing in the movie, and this is just me. Swearing in a film does take me out of it a little bit. It takes me a bit to adjust to, because I'm not used to that language. Pardon me, I'm not used to that language around me in general, and there's a hell of a lot of swearing, and yeah, it just took me out of it a little bit. I get why the characters were doing it, and it made certain situations more real. At least it felt more. It made certain sequences in the film feel more real. But yeah, some of the dialogue just took me out of it in the first half an hour. But I adjusted to it. I adjusted the dialogue, and yeah, I adjusted what his character's saying. It was just a bit. It threw me off at first. That's all I'll say. And is there anything else? No, I've already talked about that. Yeah, so I actually really enjoyed this film though. Those are my criticisms. I do have some problems with the film, and I'm not going to say it's brilliant, although there's some brilliant moments in the movie. I'm not going to say it's brilliant overall, and it won't end up being one of my films of 2023, one of the best films of 2023 for me, but what it is wildly entertaining. It is a very fun and enjoyable movie. And I said before that I did find the characters a bit unlikable at first, but I also liked how the performers in the film, John Boyega, Tiona Paris, and Jamie Foxx, added pathos into their performances, into their characters through their performances. I really liked that about it, and I did get invested in all these characters, and I found it at times quite surprising where the story was going, in the way you're meant with this film. And as already mentioned, there's so many great sequences too. There's a sequence that takes place in a chicken shop, as I've already talked about plenty of times, but that was a sequence where I was like, yep, this movie is great. But there's also another great sequence which takes place after the characters have gone through this strip club and are being chased. And the ending of the film too, I really liked. I really loved the ending of this movie, because even though when the ending sequence started, I could tell what was going to happen, I still loved how it was done, and I loved that they chose that as the ending because it sets up a potential sequel if the filmmakers behind this movie want to do another one. If Netflix want to do another, They Cloned Tyrone, they could do. But at the same time, if you left it, it's a very interesting ending, which will leave you questioning and talking about the movie after you saw it. And yeah, I think it's worth your time. It's got this groove to it too, which I really enjoyed about it. And yeah, it's a good movie. It's a really good movie. In fact, it's a great movie, as I already said. And I love the performances, and I found it compelling. I found it to be intriguing. I found the mystery quite interesting as well. And yes, it could have felt more intense in its third act. Like, it could have had more suspense thrown into there. But for me, I still liked it overall, though, because, as I already mentioned, it was wildly entertaining. And as I've titled this podcast today, it was a sci-fi thriller that had a groove to it. And that is what made it a great movie. That is what made this a great film. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that They Cloned Tyrone. I'm going to say it's an 8. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to say it's an 8.3 out of 10. The reason I'm giving that rating is because I give any movie that I think is great an 8 out of 10. An 8.3 out of 10 is because I think this has got some brilliant moments. I just don't think it's brilliant overall. I'd give a brilliant film like an 8.5 out of 10, but at the same time, even though it's not quite brilliant in my opinion. And one of the reasons I don't think it is brilliant, by the way, I've mentioned this, but I'm going to mention it here. One of the reasons I don't think it's brilliant is because it wasn't as moving as I think it could have been. It could have been a lot more emotional, and it didn't have that emotional pull for me. I didn't find it to be a particularly moving watch, and that's not because I didn't care about the characters. There just wasn't anything in the film which made me too emotional. It's still, yeah, it is great. It's just, it's a really good Netflix film, which is something you don't hear many people say. And I've been rambling on about this movie way too long. Why do I always do this? Why do I always ramble on for over 20 minutes on my podcast recently? I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to round things off by saying I had a great time with this movie. It's a great film, and I definitely recommend it. And it's a sci-fi thriller. As I already said, it's a sci-fi thriller with a groove to it, which is why I liked it. Which is why I really liked it. And as I already mentioned, I'm going to say that They Cloned Tyrone is an 8.3 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, that is it for this podcast for today. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully you had a good time hearing about my thoughts on They Cloned Tyrone. And if you've seen the movie, please let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below, because I'd love to hear what some people thought of the film. You've already seen it, because I haven't heard many people talk about it online. Maybe it's because they live under a rock, but still, I'd love to hear what people thought of the movie nonetheless. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast, and look forward to many more podcasts coming very, very soon on this channel. As we mentioned, thank you for watching or listening, and I will see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye!